Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Today I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on the Alien role-playing game. So this is a science fiction horror RPG that was put out by Free League Publishing. And they did send a few of these items that you see before you for me to do review videos on, which I do want to thank them for that. It was fantastic working with them. I really enjoyed reading through the materials. And if you want to check out those videos, there will be a playlist that you can click on at the end that should have the reviews for the starter set, the story of worlds, as well as example videos using the core rulebook on how to create characters, how to do skill checks, how to go through combat. So you basically learn the way that the game sort of plays. So if you want to see all those, like I said, there'll be a playlist you can click on at the end of the video. So the Alien role-playing game, like I said, is a science fiction horror RPG. It is set in the Alien universe based off of the Alien film. So this is a licensed product. And man, what a licensed product this is. With this review, at the end of the video, I typically share whether I recommend it or not. So I do recommend this role-playing game with a caveat, which we'll sort of get to when we reach that point. It uses the D6 dice pool system. There is a name for it. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but it's a system that other Free League games use. Like Vossen, for example, uses it, and Tales from the Loop, I think, is the other RPG. Yeah, Tales from the Loop is the other RPG that I know uses it. And I think there's, many of their other games use that system as well. I just, like I said, I can't remember them, what the name of it is off the top of my head. But it's a really simple system where you have a dice pool of D6s that you roll based off of skill checks that you make by combining your skill rank with the attribute value that's attached to that skill, adding those numbers together to give you the number of D6 that you roll, and you're looking for sixes for successes. If you roll a single six, you succeed at the task unless there's other issues going on, or if it's an imposed check, for example, that may sort of make things a little bit more difficult. However, if you roll extra successes, they can be applied in a few different ways. There are different stunts that you can perform that can make performing the same skill easier later on. Giving another player that's going through the same situation or making the same check a bonus die that they can roll, or if you're doing like for attacks, for example, extra successes can be used to increase the damage that you deal. It's a very simple system. It is very easy to explain and to pick up and to understand really, really quickly. Like, this is something that you can explain the basics of the game within just a couple of minutes, and it's very easy to pick up and play. The Alien role-playing game also adds the stress dice, which is a similar D6 pool, where as you go through the scenarios and you encounter alien creatures or horrific scenes of someone like with a chest burster that came out of them, or a mutilated body, or just something that's considered to be horrific, you add stress. Each point of stress that you gain gives you an extra special D6 that you can roll, which gives you an extra chance to succeed, but also comes with the risk of having you potentially roll or go into a panic. The more stress you have, the worse panic results that you can get. Lower stress amounts mean that while you panic, there may be some sort of negative aspect to that, but it doesn't necessarily impact the way that, or your abilities to succeed at the task. Later on, as your stress amounts get higher and higher, you do run the risk of completely freezing up. The stress system is actually really well designed, in my opinion, because the lower results really make it so that, like for example, you have to add your stress level, whatever it is, so the number of stress dice that you're rolling, basically, you add that number to a 1d6 dice roll, and numbers 1 through 9 don't impact your ability to succeed at the task. 1 through 6, nothing happens at all, and with 7, 8, and 9, you have sort of these minor things that could affect things in a very minute way, but don't actually impede you from succeeding at what you're trying to do. You need a 10 or higher to run into that situation, which means you need at least 4 stress in order for that to happen. So it's something that early on, it can be a benefit and an annoyance, but not a complete and total handicap. Later in the game, though, it can get very, very interesting. For example, running into a xenomorph queen and, panicking and just going, like, freezing up completely, going catatonic. screaming or fleeing. It makes for some really sort of tense and honestly kind of realistic reactions to certain things. So I really do like the panic system, and that is something, again, that's unique to this system over the other Free League RPGs that at least I'm aware of. So again, I think that they've done a really, really good job with that. The Alien role-playing game is set in the canonical Alien universe. So when Disney bought 20th Century Fox, and with that, the rights to like the Alien film franchise, they commissioned, or they wanted to have an official canon created that they can use as references for all of their movies going forward. I forget the name of the person that actually created that, but he was someone who was very instrumental in creating the Alien role-playing game. And basically what they did is they went through the movies and some of the other stories and some of the other sort of offshoots of the Alien film franchise to determine what is considered to be a canonical part of the universe and what's not. So, for example, the Alien versus Predator movies are not considered to be canon. The Alien RPG also takes place only a few years after Alien 3. I think it's like a decade or less after Alien 3. So technically, Alien Resurrection is also not considered to be canonical, at least based on the setting for the campaign or the role-playing game. Whether it's canonical for the movie franchises is a whole different thing, but for the RPG system, the default start date is just a few years after Alien 3. The setting is actually really well done as well. Like, the setting information is fantastic. You get a pretty decent amount of information on the major groups that are at play. So for the governments, you have the United Americas, which is sort of a North and South America basically united to become one giant nation. So they're one of the major superpowers. There's also the Three World Empire, which I can't remember all the countries involved, but England is one of them. And then you have the Union of Progressive Peoples, which is sort of the space communists. So I think you have like China and Russia, I believe, are sort of like the Union of Progressive Peoples. And then you have like mercenaries, you have like, pirates, space pirates sort of thing going on, as well as you have sort of these colonists that have sort of created their own sort of government. It's kind of interesting because if you look at like the United Americas or Three World Empire, and you have like these colonists, I forget the name of the colonist faction off the top of my head, but you actually kind of get just a little bit of a Firefly feeling from it, which, the first episode of Firefly had the scene where Malcolm Reynolds was on the turret, actually had the Weyland-Yutani logo on there. So, they could be considered, even though they're not canonical or official, you could sort of create a Firefly type game within the Alien universe, which is kind of interesting. So the Reavers, instead of going out to the edges of space and going mad, maybe they just found like the black goo accelerant and it caused them to go insane. So there's things that you can sort of do with that, which I think is kind of cool. The setting also has your corporation. So of course you have Weyland-Yutani, you have Seegson, and then there's another company that's sort of built around bioengineering. I forget the name of them sort of again off the top of my head. But again, they all sort of work sort of against each other, and you get a decent amount of information on how they interact with one another. So again, a great deal of information that you can use in order to create your own adventures. For the adventures themselves, there are two different gameplay styles that you can go through when you are running a game of the Alien role-playing game or the Alien RPG. There is the campaign play, which is sort of what you think of traditionally when it comes to RPGs. These are longer-term stories or series of adventures with the same group of characters going through different adventures, different story arcs. They may or may not be all related to one another. They could be part of an overarching story, or they could just be a series of episodic events that the player characters are part of. They could be like a crew of smugglers. They could be a group of Weyland-Yutani operatives or colonial marines going through and maybe having to quell colonial like uprising or having to deal with a union of progressive peoples coming in and causing issues. So with campaign play, you create your own characters. You get to level them up as you go through. The characters are expected to survive at least, decently into the overall story that you're telling. And you can run, there's really no limit to how long you can run campaign play for. The other mode of play is what's referred to as cinematic scenarios. With cinematic scenarios, you get a group of pre-generated characters, as well as a handful of NPCs that can be used when the pre-generated characters meet their eventual demise. The cinematic scenarios, as the name would imply, really capture the feel of the Alien movies, and they do a really good job of it. I've already done videos on the starter set and Destroyer of Worlds already, which are considered to be cinematic scenarios. In cinematic scenarios, survival is great, but having a really cool death scene is just as important, because how many characters actually survive in the Alien movies? Typically not very many. So yeah, it's one of those things where you've got a group of players that are characters that are thrown together by circumstance in a lot of situations, and will have their own personal agendas, which don't always necessarily mesh well with one another. If you run cinematic scenarios and you use the personal agendas, one thing that I would recommend is that you make sure that your group is capable of being able to play situations where a PvP situation may come up and not take it like as a personal attack. Having the personal agendas presented as a series of cards which do spell out what you are supposed to do takes the edge off that a little bit. But it is one of those things that you just want to make sure that your group is capable of having situations like that come up without wanting to give the player a receipt later on, sort of thing. Like, don't take it personally. It's just the way the scenario is designed, and it's designed that way to help tell the story that the scenario is trying to tell. With the starter set, with the pre-generated or the cinematic adventures that have been released so far, it's really interesting to see the inspirations that they've sort of drawn from. The starter set, for example, feels like a mix of the original 1979 Alien, along with Alien Covenant. You have, the black goo, but you also have the characters finding a derelict or answering a distress call as they're awakened from cryogenic sleep, and they have to investigate this derelict ship. Which, has like the black goo, and, it doesn't have the xenomorph in the starter set, but it does have like the neomorph and the bloodbursters and stuff like that. But it actually really does the Alien Covenant aspects really well, which was one of the things that I was really surprised by, because I really didn't like the black goo concept in the movies. But in the RPG, it's actually, it makes sense, it's logical, it's done really well, and it takes, the concepts of Alien Covenant, but actually presents it in the way that you don't necessarily hate, or at least I didn't necessarily hate, so they did a really good job there. And Destroyer of Worlds, you're a group of colonial marines, it really captures the feel of the movie Aliens from 1986, again with a little bit of Alien Covenant or a little bit of Prometheus maybe thrown in there as well. But again, done really, really well. The cinematic scenarios, in my opinion, as much as campaign play is appreciated, and I'm sure there are people out there that's their preferred way to play the game, in my opinion, this game works best with the cinematic style in mind. This is a licensed product that uses the Alien movie license, uses the xenomorph creatures, and if I'm running a game of Alien, unless I do try to create like a Firefly type campaign, which might be fun, but if I'm running an Alien RPG, I want the gosh dang xenomorphs to be a part of it. So for me, cinematic scenarios, like I said, I think it's sort of the bread and butter of the system. With these cinematic scenarios, if that's what you plan on running, you actually don't need the core rulebook. You only need the starter set, because the starter set rulebook has all the information that you need to run cinematic scenarios. The only thing you might want the core rulebook for in that situation is if you want to design your own cinematic scenarios and you want to include the xenomorphs, because they are in Destroyer of Worlds and not the starter set. But if you get both, then you've got access to both of those as well. The core rulebook really focuses on the campaign play with character creation, character advancement, as well as expanding the setting and providing a lot of setting information there. So, if you want to create richer feeling or more in-depth feeling games, then the rulebook is definitely recommended. But if you just want to pick up and play, and you just want to pick up and play scenarios based off of your favorite Alien movies, then the starter set and the other box sets will be definitely the way to go for that. But it's also, like I said, nice that they do accommodate for both. As far as like the setting is concerned, the one of the things that the writers did was a lot of fan service, but fan service that comes from a genuine love of the source material and not just a cynical corporate thing of, oh, if we include this, they'll spend more money. You can tell that this whole RPG is really a labor of love. Like, you can tell that the writers are passionate about what they're writing about. They love the world, they love the setting, they love some of the more obscure aspects of it. For example, they include a couple of things that are really interesting to have in the game. A large example would be like the Praetorians. Praetorians were included in like the video games and some of the comics and novels, but there was always a question as to whether they were actually considered to be canonical or not. So Praetorians are sort of like the royal guard type of thing. They typically have, like, they're taller than the regular warrior xenomorphs, but they also have the beginnings of a crest like the alien queen. And there's a theory that if the alien queen dies, a Praetorian can actually bolt into a new queen, which is something that the RPG does actually sort of reference. So they're included, and that makes them canonical for the Alien universe. But the other thing that, again, the really great example of obscure fan service is the wooden planet. So for those of you who aren't aware, when the third Alien movie, Alien 3, was in its earlier pre-production phases, are actually just about to enter production, they hired a director by the name of Vincent Ward. And Vincent Ward, his concept for the movie was that Ripley crash lands on a wooden planet. So it's basically like a space station where all the metal parts are sort of covered in wood, and it's run by a group of monks that are sort of like apocalyptic monks, where they believe that technology is, and reliance on technology is like the root of all evil, which is ironic because their wooden planet is one of the most advanced technological aspects of the entire universe in the alien system anyway. But that was sort of the plan, and so you had the monks. They were like these devout worshippers, and Ripley crash landing causes them to start questioning their beliefs. And they were actually producing sets for that version of the movie when Fox sort of stepped in and replaced Vincent Ward with David Fincher. And they changed the monastery to the prison planet, and instead of being a wooden planet like a space station sort of thing, it just became a planet that had a penal colony on it, where all the prisoners were also like born again Christians, but born again into, again, sort of a apocalyptic sort of worship sort of thing. Always trying to prepare for the end of the world, basically. But yeah, they actually include the wooden planet in there, which is a really nice nod to that sort of phase of the Alien 3 pre-production. They also have a location on the map, on the like the galactic map of the alien world, or the alien setting. That's actually called O'Bannon's World, and that's another great nod to Dan O'Bannon, who was the original screenwriter for the 1979 Alien before it was sort of rewritten and reworked, and some things were sort of changed to the final product that we saw and led to this RPG existing in the first place. But again, having an O'Bannon's World is a great nod to the original creator, and a really fitting tribute, I think. And I was really surprised and really happy to see that in there. So again, there's just a lot of great fan service, but again, it's done out of a genuine love for what they're putting into the books over a corporate, cynical sort of approach. And honestly, with Free League, everything I've seen so far from them has been sort of to that style or to that quality, and you can tell that the people working on these products really have a genuine love and interest in what they're doing. And it's not, just a corporate mandate. It's not, a big, system that is, well known or has a maybe long running history. They're putting out games that they are passionate about, systems and settings that they really care about and that they want to have out there for other people to develop an interest in. So that was sort of the case with Vossen, and it's definitely the case here with the Alien role-playing game. So at the end of the day, do I recommend this RPG? The answer is yes, with the caveat of yes, if you are a fan of the source material. Now, you don't necessarily have to be an expert on the Alien franchise. You don't necessarily have to have seen all the movies to be able to appreciate or run an adventure in the Alien system. But this is a horror RPG, and this is a horror RPG that does not shy away from the horror elements. The flavor text in the box sets for Destroyer of Worlds and the starter set have some pretty graphic descriptions of like blood bursters or chest bursters, or just scenes of like that the players can come across where maybe there was a chest burst that had already erupted, and what they see as sort of the aftermath of that. There's a really amazing scene in Destroyer of Worlds with a variant of the Bloodburster sort of being born or birthed. And it's, like I said, it's incredibly graphic. So if you're not someone who's comfortable with that, it's going to be an issue for sure. So if you're not a fan of horror, particularly body horror, then this is not going to be the system for you. However, if you are a fan of the Alien movies, like you love the movies, or you love the comics, or the video games, or the novels, and you want to play a role-playing game that takes advantage of those creatures and settings and worlds, and yes, takes advantage of the horror, then this is an absolutely fantastic system. So if you are someone who wants to run this for a group and you're not sure how comfortable they are with some of these things, I must stress that this is a system where you really need to make clear before starting the kinds of things that the players may end up coming up against. So if someone's not comfortable with like the body horror elements, for example, then maybe it's best to find something else to do, and until you can get a group that's all composed of people that are 100% interested in that type of system or that type of scenarios that you can go through. So yeah, just make sure you know what your players are comfortable with. Make sure make sure that the players are fully aware that there's some gruesome stuff in this system. It's not gratuitous, like it's not to the point where it feels excessive. There's really only a few really graphic descriptions between the two different things, but those descriptions really do set a very definite tone for what you can expect from the system. So again, it's something that I highly recommend for fans of the Alien franchise, or fans of science fiction horror in general. So again, just be clear with your players what to expect, and if they're not comfortable with it, don't force them to it. Just maybe find something else to do in the meantime until you can find a group that gels with the system. So that's sort of the caveat. This is a licensed property after all, so it makes sense that this is more for fans of the license. But like I said, you can do some interesting things. So like I said, you could sort of try to run an almost Firefly-esque campaign that never uses the xenomorphs or the face huggers or the chest bursters or any of that stuff, and just focuses on the more human aspects. So you can definitely do that as well, but just make sure you know what your group's capable of, or what they're not capable of is not the right term, what they're comfortable with. Other than that, though, this is an amazing system, and I cannot recommend enough. Super easy to pick up and play, super easy to get the hang of. Very, very well done rule set that you can learn and really get the gist of in just a few minutes, and just amazing setting work. So overall, just a fantastic role-playing game that I highly, highly recommend. It's one of the favorites that I have in my collection right now. So with that said, I do want to thank Free League once again for sending me the Destroyer of Worlds box set, as well as the starter set. It sort of got the ball rolling for what's becoming one of my favorite RPGs that I have in my collection. And so let me know in the comments below, what do you guys think of the Alien role-playing game? If you've had a chance to play any adventures, let me know what some of the situations that you came across, or how the group handled certain things. Let me know if you've run adventures, if you've run cinematic, or if you've run campaign play, sort of how that's gone for you. What your thoughts are on the two different gameplay styles, if you like the fact that they accommodate both, or if you think they should have just gone all in on one or the other. Let me know that in the comments below. If you want to know more about the actual mechanics of the Alien role-playing game, there is a playlist that you can click on that will have not only my reviews of the starter set, Story of Worlds, and the Game Mother screen, the GM screen, but it will also have videos on character creation, rolling skill checks, panic, and combat. So if you want to see all those, click on the playlist at the end. Anyway, thank you guys once again very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all next time. Take care.